Hey everyone, in the race towards a bezel-free future, we've seen notches, we've seen hole punches, and we've seen pop-up cameras. And now we've seen a pop-up camera in the shape of a shark fin. This is Oppo's newest flagship, the Oppo Reno 10x zoom. Silly name aside, this phone is packed full of features, especially that 10x zoom. And it's launching at a very interesting time. The Huawei P30 Pro, which is its main competitor, has an unclear future ahead of it thanks to the notorious US ban. So now seems like the perfect moment for the Oppo to swoop in and take its place as the 10x zoom king. But how good is that camera? And how are the rest of the features? I'm Andrew for GSM Arena, and this is a review of the Oppo Reno 10x zoom. Man, Oppo really needs to work on their names. On the front, it has miniature bezels and a slightly thicker chin. There's no notch and zero space for a front camera, which is why you'll have the fin pop up whenever you need to take a selfie. Personally, out of all the pop-up camera designs that we've seen, this is probably my favorite, but then again I love sharks, so I'm incredibly biased when it comes to this. Strange selfie aesthetic aside, make no mistake, this is a really pretty phone. The Oppo Reno has a beautiful frosty back that feels great. Ours is ocean green and it actually lives up to its name. There's a line that goes over the cameras and the Oppo logo that's a slightly different texture. There's also this tiny little bump that Oppo is calling the O-dot. Supposedly it's there to keep the cameras from being scratched when the phone is on a flat surface and to keep the phone from being too slippery. Unfortunately, that also means that it wobbles a little bit when it's on a desk, but it's not too much so it doesn't get very annoying. In the hand, the Reno is quite comfortable, though it's surprisingly heavy. The buttons are in the right place and they're not mushy. There's a little crease in the frame to make the grip better, and you won't find it slipping out of your hand as you talk. However, it is a bit wide, so it's not always the easiest to use one-handed. Gestures help a lot, and there's actually a few options for them. You can swipe up from the bottom or choose the one where you can swipe in from either side to go back. Of course, you can stick to navigation buttons, but that takes up extra screen real estate. As far as biometrics are concerned, there's no slowdown when getting into your phone. The in-display fingerprint reader is one of the fastest optical sensors we've seen, and while the face unlock with the fin isn't quite instant, it feels pretty close. The phone is made of Gorilla Glass 6 on the front and Gorilla Glass 5 on the back, and it has a metal frame. It feels sturdy, and it'll probably survive a drop as long as it's not from too high up. Sadly, there's no IP protection to speak of, and though there's likely no problem in the rain, I'd keep it far away from pools. The 6.6-inch AMOLED is totally flat and bypasses a trend where flagships have curved screens. In general, it's a good display, but it's not the best at its price point. It has a Full HD resolution and a decent pixel density of 387 ppi. You'll get the most accurate colors if you drag the saturation slider to warm, because otherwise whites have a bit of a bluish tint. At 440 nits, it's bright enough and it's usable on a sunny day, but it's not spectacular and you'll get no boost when you're in auto brightness. Still, despite not standing out from the crowd, it's great for watching videos and playing games. The Oppo is pretty good on a sound front. It has stereo speakers, although the sound that comes from the earpiece is worse than the bottom firing one. It has a very good level of loudness and sound is surprisingly rich.
Have no place to go, darling. Have no place to go.
There's no headphone jack, and the phone did not come with a dongle, so we couldn't test the audio quality because it really depends on what sort of adapter you buy. On the bottom of the phone, there's also an expandable card slot, so you won't feel limited when downloading music or videos. With 4,065 mAh, this is not the biggest battery we've seen, but endurance turned out to be spectacular. It got an endurance rating of 107 hours in our battery life tests. The 20-watt VOOC fast charging is also excellent because it gets you from 0 to 52% in half an hour. The Reno flies through games and day-to-day tasks. This is not surprising with the Snapdragon 855 chipset. After all, only Samsung's latest Exynos is a match for it in the Android world. The Oppo Reno runs Android Pie with Oppo's latest ColorOS 6 on top. This is not the cleanest, most pared-down UI you'll see, but the extras are nice and they don't bog down the phone. Some, like the one-tap lock screen, seem a little silly, but others are quite fun, like Music Party, which syncs several phones to play the same song. There's a smart assistant on the left of the main screen that is less an assistant and more a shelf with a bunch of shortcuts. And there's a sidebar that's reminiscent of Samsung's Edge. You can block notifications and put a few shortcut apps, but sadly you can't put any context in there. The notification shade has taken a cue from Apple and it looks a little more like iOS. However, it doesn't impede usability and it looks nice. Speaking of looks, I found the icons to be a little cluttered for my taste, so the first thing I did when I got my hands on the phone was to install a more minimal theme. The Oppo Reno 10x zoom has a triple camera setup. There's the telephoto camera and an ultra-wide one, but the star is the 48 megapixel main sensor. It combines each 4 adjacent pixels into one, which results in a higher quality 12 megapixel shot. Daylight snaps are excellent. They have plenty of detail, a wide dynamic range, accurate colors, and good contrast. The processing is quite good too, and you won't find too many sharpening halos. The ultra-wide camera has good colors and excellent contrast. There's plenty of detail in the center of the images, and Auto HDR helps with a weaker dynamic range. Sadly, the telephoto experience is less epic than you'd expect from a phone with such a name. The default 6x zoom is a hybrid between optical and digital zoom, since the lens is really 5x. So to get purely optical magnification, you need to pinch zoom to 5x, which is not very user-friendly. 5x zoom produces detailed shots with accurate colors and good detail levels. Even the dynamic range isn't too bad. Photos with 6x zoom don't offer any extra detail and have lower per-pixel sharpness compared to the 5x zoom. Really, it's the same as cropping a 5x shot in post. Photos with a 10x zoom aren't good for pixel peeping and are only good for focusing and exposing a subject in the distance. Low-light photos have a too dark exposure but are otherwise impressive. They have plenty of detail, little noise, and pretty much zero camera shake thanks to the OIS. There's also night mode, which takes a second or two. You'll need to keep your hand steady, but it does a better job of balancing the exposure and it restores blown highlights. If you stick to a more conservative 5x or 6x zoom, the telephoto takes some pretty usable low-light shots. The ultra-wide images are often murky and underexposed as a favorite highlight clipping prevention. The night mode turned out to be incredibly beneficial in improving the quality of these shots. If you're curious, we've left a link to the full comparison between the Huawei P30 Pro and the Oppo Reno. It was a close call, but the P30 Pro had the upper hand in most shooting scenarios. Portraits were stellar and had excellent subject separation with no abrupt transitions, even when in complex surroundings. The 16 megapixel selfie camera has an f2.0 aperture and a fixed focus. When there's enough light, selfies are super detailed and sharp. In dimmer conditions, sharpness drops because of the aggressive noise reduction. Selfie portraits are mediocre, especially compared to the main camera, and subject separation was a hit-or-miss affair. In general, the video the Oppo produced blew our expectations out of the water. The 4K footage is noise-free, it's packed with detail, and it has great dynamic range. Colors are on point and contrast is top-notch. 4K is only optically stabilized, but Full HD clips have the benefit of EIS, and footage is just as good, although in a lower resolution. Too bad we get no video recording by the telephoto or the ultra-wide cameras. In summary, the Oppo Reno 10x zoom has a clever design, a great AMOLED screen, class-leading battery performance, and a top-of-the-line chipset. Camera performance is a bit of a mixed bag with its weird limitations but its great capabilities. Images and videos are flagship level, but at the same time you have to mess around in settings to really enjoy what the phone is capable of, which is a huge hit to the user experience. In China and India, the phone is pretty much priced at a bargain, but in Europe the pricing is merely okay, and a month ago I'd have said that this phone is in danger of being overlooked. However, now with Huawei's woes and the gap in the market that they've created, the Oppo has a serious chance of succeeding, especially with the versatility of its camera system. Now, Oppo phones aren't available everywhere, but if this one is available where you live, I think it's worth a serious consideration. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button down below, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll see you next time.